I've been studying the game again with a real passion. I've come up with a study method that I think makes poker far less confusing, that allows you to standardize your game and build a strategy, a game plan that's simple and effective for lots of common and important spots. I've been using this for the last few days. I'm going to show you what it looks like in today's video. But first off, let's have a little chat. Let me update you about all things Pete Clark and Carrot Corner. We've had a really good couple of years, business-wise. I've been working very hard. I've been kind of whipping myself as my own boss. I don't know if you've ever run a company or worked for yourself, but you don't have someone telling you what to do. And sometimes I overcompensated in that I was extremely strict. I was like, I have to put out 2 YouTube videos per week. I have to do this. I have to do that. At times I was even a bit obsessive and crazy. But it's worked out. I've achieved everything that I want to achieve on the business front for now. The business is in a really good place. We've improved our technology. We've got loads of courses. We've got the full Carrot Poker School plus other courses, full subscription service, everything organized and, in my opinion, looking a lot better now at Carrot Corner. And I've achieved all of the goals I wanted to achieve, and in good time too, because my son was born 6 weeks ago, and this has really caused a giant shift in my psyche. How to explain this, guys? I've gone from being this like type A, super driven, workaholic, obsessed guy to someone that wants to sit back and enjoy life and just be one with the present moment. And that carries over into poker as well. I want to fall back in love with this game. I want to get back to my roots. I want to stop neglecting the garden that is my own game and stop looking around and seeing like wilted flowers. I want to see stuff growing. I want to see order. I want to see rows of lines and game plans for different spots. And so that's what I've been building, working with my friends Sam and Akshar, who both play mid-high stakes and are very serious and committed about getting better at poker as well. So it's been reinvigorating. This year, there's less for me to do at Carrot Corner. I'm not planning major overhauls, loads of new courses, tons of stuff that's going to stress me out. Instead, I'm going to take it easier. I'm going to focus on quality over quantity. There might not be exactly 2 YouTube videos being released on exactly Wednesdays and Fridays or at 5 p.m. or whatever. But that's okay, because we've planted the seeds over the last few years. We've reaped the rewards. And I want to enjoy my life. I don't want to wake up one day and be like, man, I had a child and I was working so hard that I was barely around to be involved in his life. One of my students warned me about this. He said, whatever you do, make sure that you're present for your son when he comes along. I want to let that student know, if he's watching this, that I'm doing my very best, man. I appreciate the advice. So I will be doing a bit of coaching. I'll be doing a bit of Carrot Corner stuff. I'll still be running the company. I've got other people who are great that are helping me do that now. And it's freed up a lot of time. I'm not going to be working like completely full time. I'm not going to be setting myself loads of really stressing deadlines like I have in the past. I'm going to be less of a sort of workaholic weirdo and try to just really fall in love with the game again. The study method that I'm about to show you has really helped me do that so far this year. I'm really excited about it. I want you to be too. I think it's going to simplify your game for yourself. It's going to help you feel less confused. And if you can commit to it, I think it's going to make a massive difference. And I want to tell you about it today. Before we get to the video, it is January. There's a January sale going on at Carrot Corner. We're offering 25% off absolutely everything. The snow is literally falling on the homepage right now. Great job, graphic designer. And yeah, that's 25% off our most recent course, Weapons of War, and all other courses. And of course, the Golden Carrot, which is the access pass to everything that we have put on site, the full Carrot Poker School, all video premium courses, and all of the subscription content, present and future. With that out of the way, let's get to the video. Let me show you what I've been working on. Hope you like it as much as I do. So this is a PowerPoint sheet that I'm making. It's for button versus big blind. And what you can see here is that I have broken down flop textures into 4 types of flop that each have an example texture. So on King 7-3 Rainbow, as we have here on the left, this is actually the turn spot we're going to look at today. I've got this ready to go in GTO Wizard. I'll show you how to do that in a second. We're playing an R33. If you've taken the Carrot Poker School, you'll know what these boxes all mean. If you've not, don't worry, it's pretty intuitive. R33 means you're betting range on this flop for 33% of the pot. That is my simplified strategy for King 7-3. That is one of the boards that I feel very happy about just playing a range bet on. and therefore there's only one possible flop action that we can take, and that is betting as the button against the big blind here. Then I wrote down the 10 of hearts turn. You can see that this is underlined. This is no coincidence. If I hold control here, I can actually click on this, and it's going to take us to the GTO Wizard sim for that spot. So that's right. I have been building sims for the textures I've written here. I've been linking them into the PowerPoint, and then when I'm studying, imagine one day when I'm a good boy and actually do this 100 times, I have 100 different sheets of different textures for button versus big blind, and I go through them and click on the various spots and study that way and revise what I'm learning. This to me is a really cool way to do it because it lays it out visually, and it's basically hyper simple. So I know that on the turn here, after I've bet the flop and I have a double barrel opportunity on the 10 of hearts, I know that overbet and check are going to be my toolkit. That's all I'm using. I don't use any B75s on a turn like that. I, of course, don't bet small. I just overbet check because it's a very high nut advantage spot with a very polar range against a very condensed one, very asymmetric. So we're going to be using the really, really big sizing. That's what we're going to look at today. I'm going to show you how I will study this turn spot. You're going to see me studying. You're going to see me improving my turn strategy on this node, and maybe also diving into a few river spots. They would be listed down here when I've completed this sheet. I'm in the very early stages at the moment, so I haven't. Over here now we have ace of diamonds, six of diamonds, three of spades. This is a small bet board, but it's not going to be a range bet for me. I know that I'm playing a B33, but I could also check, and therefore there are going to be two different branches here. One where I've bet the flop and then have a double barrel opportunity, and one where I've checked the flop and then have a double barrel opportunity. My go-to sizing happens to be exactly the same in both of those nodes. I've simplified my own game tree such that when I'm against a reg, I'm not using exploits. I'm not just playing my hand in a vacuum against a weaker player, which is what I would do, by the way, against a fish or whatnot. I have a standard go-to B75 or check strategy on the turn here after betting flop, and for my delayed c-bet on this card, the 7 of diamonds, is also B75 or check. The reason I'm playing a smaller sizing than on this node on the left-hand side here in the rainbow board with the 10 of hearts turn is that here we do not have as big a nut advantage when the big blind checks the turn to us on either of these nodes. They are going to have flushes. They're going to be uncapped at the top, more so on this one than they are on this one, but they're still uncapped on both of them. And therefore we just use a smaller sizing because the value range we're betting is not pushing as much equity, it is not as dominant, and it's not craving as much piling of the money into the middle. Villain is a bit more polarized compared to our range on this texture than they are over here. On 8-6 deuce, I use a B75 check strategy on the flop. I've kind of always done that. These things here are not actually new. There is a new flop strategy in my game that we'll talk about over here in a second, which is the flop overbet strategy for double Broadway textures. I'll come to that. But on 8-6 deuce rainbow, I'm playing B75 or check. And on the jack of spades turn, that's one of my pot check nodes. Basically, when an overcard comes on the turn, I am going to be playing pot check on both the double barrel node and the delayed c-bet node. And there are reasons for that are kind of to do with the fact that on the jack of spades turn, villain is more polarized than they are on this example, right, over here, where they're just more capped, condensed. The jack of spades creates some polarization because they hit like top pair, then their other stuff is a bit devalued, but they're not as polarized as they are on the 7 of diamonds. That's one way of phrasing this. There's other ways you can phrase this. You can talk about nut advantage, range, symmetry, all kinds of jargon that you'll hear thrown around, but basically the bigger the uncapped advantage for your range relative to the opponents, the bigger the sizing you want to play. So on jack of spades, I tend to play pot check. That's just what I do. It's not the only way to go. I am not telling you that you have to revamp your entire approach to poker. I'm picking a strategy that works for me, picking a strategy that I like, and in part, I'm picking a strategy that is a deep dark forest for my opponents. Now, what do I mean by that? A deep dark forest, to quote Mikhail Tal, the chess player of the 50s, 60s, maybe early 70s, Latvian Grandmaster, is that you want to lure your opponent into a deep dark forest where 2 + 2 = 5, and the path out is only wide enough for one. So Tal's trying to create a situation over the chessboard that's wild and chaotic and unfamiliar to his opponents, and he was very good at dealing with unfamiliar opportunities. Now, that's not quite what we're doing here, because when we go for, let's say, the flop overbet here to create an unfamiliar landscape for our opponents, it's not just that we're better at flop overbet spots. That's not really what we're saying. It's that we've studied it and they haven't. So we're trying to lure them into our own labyrinth that we know the layout of and they don't. And of course, if you had to fight someone in a labyrinth that you knew like the back of your hand, you would have more of an advantage than if you were to fight them in an open field. So yeah, I am trying to pick sizes at certain points in the game tree, like this pot check strategy here that people just haven't seen. They're seeing a lot of B75 here. There may be seeing some overbet here. I'm using pot check. I think it's less familiar to the regs. Again, against recreationals, I will play my hand in a vacuum. I will try to maximize EV. I'll go fully on the front foot here and try to exploit. But against the better players in my game, I want to have this default strategy that I can fall back on, and I want that default strategy to be a bit unfamiliar to my opponent's weapons of war. The course at Carrot Corner also has a lot of these lines in it that are really difficult for your opponents to deal with because they've simply not faced it very much. Of course, we have 25% off all courses right now at Carrot Corner for January only. Good time to check that and other stuff out. On Queen 10-4 then, this is where I'm using the overbet flop strategy. The idea with this one is that villain has a lot, as the big blind here, villain has a lot of second pair here. Weak top pair, gutter, and open ender. That's a very mergy, sort of condensed equity belt of hands. And we, just by having king queen or queen jack or ace queen or kings or aces here, have a monstrous hand. Villain doesn't make a lot of two pair on this texture, right? They don't really have a lot of queen 4, especially not offsuit, and 10-4 they may not even have in the suited variety. If we're 2.5x in the button. If we're 2x in the button, then they might. So they struggle to make two pair here. They struggle to do anything about the fact that when we have king queen, we have a monster, and therefore putting even more money in on the flop than is normal is great. And it is a deep dark forest strategy. I'm not saying you guys have to do this. I don't really care whether you do this or not. If you want to say there's no EV gain to overbetting the flop, in theory, you're right. There's not. You can pick a smaller size. You can simplify to half pot, B75, B61, B63.918, or even B33, or even R33, range bet. You can do all of it. And in theory, there's really no EV regret. This is a kind of flexible board, right? Not all boards are like that. A63 is not like that. You can't really play a giant bet there without losing a bit of EV, I wouldn't think. But here you can do what you want. The reason I'm doing this is because it's unfamiliar to my opponents and I like it and it inspires me and it makes me happy and it works for me and I've been studying it. That's why I'm going to be doing this. You don't need to. I'm not telling you that what you're doing is wrong, okay? I'm just saying this is what I'm doing and this is how I'm going about it. On the turn, because we've built the pot already, these are very polarized notes, right? We've overbet the flop, villain's called, we're super polar, they're not, so you might ask, why are we not overbetting again? SBR, we don't really need to. We can smoothly just go B100 Jam River now. It doesn't really matter. I'm not playing overbet. That's not a thing that I do. If I've overbet the flop, I downsize the turn. And on each of those nodes, I'm generally playing pot check as the delayed c-bet line as well, by the way. There are times you want to delayed c-bet smaller exploitatively. Of course, it can be a very effective thing to do against nitty players that aren't bluffing river much, that you just want to deny equity against, that are just folding too often, that are too passive and too tight, and not protecting that turn checking range. You want to just B33 a lot. But these are exploitative side notes, right? These are not the main game plan, the blueprint. I'm showing you the sort of nuts and bolts blueprint against regs today. Let's have a look at the range bet spot now. If I hold control here, left mouse button, for anyone that doesn't know how to do computer stuff because they're a boomer like me, I had to Google how to like click a link without right clicking and saying open this in a new tab. But yeah, we got there. So I'll show you what this looks like then. Here we have the turn spot on the 10 of hearts. The flop, there's not really much to say because we range bet the flop. If you want to set that up in GTO Wizards, you actually have to node lock it to bet all of the time. It was betting like 82% of the time here without node lock. And I think the best way to handle that as a human in real life is to range bet. I'm not generally the sort of coach that tells their students to range bet all boards for B33. I know that that is something you get away with at low stakes, and I know that that is a very high return for its simplicity type of strategy to play. I don't like to ingrain that for students that have ambition to understand the game on a really deep level, but I do like to recommend it for boards like this. If you are range betting every flop small, and you're playing lower stakes and you plan on changing that one day, that's totally fine. Again, I'm not taking issue with that. I'm not going to sit here and say something completely arrogant and moronic, like you don't deserve to play the game. I would never do that. I don't know why some of you guys don't like me and think that I act in that way and that I'm full of myself and I'm demeaning and I don't know why people wouldn't like me. I really don't get it. But anyway, back to the sim here. The funny thing is though, the people that don't like me, you're still watching this right now, aren't you? So you must like me in some way. Even if it's just to hate on me or something. So the 10 of hearts comes, and yeah, we look at this turn strategy now. This is the double barrel opportunity for button, and we're using B150, as we know from our PowerPoint. The thing is, we've clicked that. We know it's B150 check. We've gone over there. We're going to look at it. Pretty cool, right? And then there's a few things that I would do here, editor. Put these on screen in text form as I say them. There's a few things I would look for as a protocol when going through a sim like this. The first thing I would look for is the bottom of the value range. Bottom of value range, what is the weakest hand that we can be 150 for value on the turn? And by quickly looking through here, we can see that that is clearly King 9. We cannot do it with King 8 at equilibrium, although we could against the station maybe. And the idea is that we're not going to go for 3 streets of value with this bad King X. We might go bet, check, bet. We might bet river. We have to remember that we've range bet the flop. And so ranges are very wide here, and we can still go for value pretty aggressively. But because we're over betting the turn, we don't want to do that with like King 5 because the investment ceiling for that hand is not high enough that we need to put it into the turn betting range, given that we're not really betting for denial much here. We're not really very vulnerable with a hand like this. So we prefer just to put that in the checking range, see what happens, see what the river is before we decide to bet. Like, if the river is the Queen of Hearts, you don't actually like that you've bet the turn with King 5 very much, right? So just looking for the clean run out, then value betting that hand on the river makes a ton of sense. So that's the first thing I look for, is the bottom of the value range, otherwise known as the value threshold. The next thing I would look for is at what point do we lack the showdown value to actually check, because you're going to have a checking range below that, right? And where do we start bluffing? So with King 6, King 5, we're all checking. Move that down towards like queens, jacks, 9s, 8s, we're checking. 6s and 5s and 4s, we're checking. And there are some anomalies here, like 7x and 3x that I'm going to talk about in a second. But by and large, when we're not talking about these anomaly hands, these pairs on the board, we're basically going to start the bluffing again at around ace-queen high, right? So ace-queen, gutter, overcard to the board. Kind of a hybrid hand. You can get called by a little bit worse. You do deny a bit of equity to some hands that are kind of live against you. You make a lot of better fold as well. But mostly a bluff, right? And you can see here that, well, ace-jack actually is doing it less. So maybe ace-queen has a bit of like value property and then it gets called by ace-jack or something. And there's a bit of anomaly here. This isn't a perfect system. But yeah, when we're down on the case 9, right, we're pure checking and we pick up the aggression again at like ace-6 overcard, kind of flimsy hand. We start bluffing there. So the answer to like where is the bluffing threshold here is around ace-8, ace-6. This is where we start bluffing because we deem our showdown value not insufficient for checking because we can still check, but low enough that we don't have to check anymore, basically. So we have the value threshold and then we have the bluffing threshold. Where do we start bluffing? Then I would go further down and say, is there a point where our hand gets so useless and pathetic that it can't bluff? And I try and learn where that is. And the answer to that is yes. Because while we're allowed to bluff a hand that might appear at face value like it's just trash, like a6, it's actually not. This is actually a reasonable hand with some prospects. The ace is going to be an overcard a lot of the time when you overbet the turn here and get called. You'll be called by a king, or you'll be called by a 7. And when you hit the ace on the river, you have leapfrogged all of the king x, and you can probably value bet that again on some rivers. And even if you can't, at least you now beat all of the king x, even if you're checking back, right? And you might be checking back actually on the ace river here. I don't know, actually, queen jack's probably folding flop some amount of the time, depending on the suit. You are range betting small though, so maybe not. Anyway, I'm getting lost in the weeds here. So yeah, even if you're not value betting the ace river, even if it's not a super high implied odds card, you're still moving ahead of most of the calling range the villain has on the turn here. So you are able to bluff with this. This has enough going on that you want to bluff. If we move down here a bit further and we look at a hand like, well, obviously a gutter has enough going on to bluff, but if we look at queen 8 without a draw, that's an example of a hand that does not have enough going on to bluff. So 2 naked undercards to the king don't appear to be bluffs unless they're hearts, right? Which puts them in the comfortable thick equity bluffing zone. And if we follow this down and we look at like 8-5, right, we're not allowed to bluff that hand. So there are standards on a wetter turn that brings draws and brings gutters and stuff like that. The equity of just a random pair draw, like Jack 5, is going to plummet. There are some boards where like a random pair draw, just a couple of cards that can pair up on the river, is good enough for you to actually bluff. But on this sort of Broadway straight draw bringing, flush draw bringing card, you need to be a bit more equity heavy to be 150 here. So we're kind of learning that the overcard to the board is enough to bluff with, and the gutter is enough to bluff with, but the random 2 undercards are not on this particular turn. If the turn was something else, like the 3 of spades or something, you might find more pair draw hands like Jack 10 on that texture betting, but you don't see pair draw hands like Jack Jack 6 betting on this texture, unless it's actually the flush draw. So that's the third threshold, is like the hopelessness sort of bottom of the bluffing range. What are the minimum standards kind of threshold? Okay, so that's the range geography of this spot. I would then ask, what am I doing wrong in game here? And I'll tell you what I think I'm doing wrong and what I can improve on. It's a very like honest question that you just always want to ask yourself. If I was in game, what would I do differently to the solver, right? And I'll explain the few things I've noticed here that I'm going to write down and make a point of, or at least make a, tattoo them into my brain, hopefully, and then remember them in a spot like this in future. Before we get into that, though, I said I would come back to this hybrid idea. When we look at a hand like Queen 7 here, we can see that some of these combos are betting. I think a good example is like the Queen 7 of Hearts. And the idea here is that this is a hybrid, right? Meaning it has multiple reasons to bet. It can make better fold. Villain is going to be folding like pocket 8s, pocket 9s, stuff like this on this node. And it can be called by worse, because villain will call with ace jack maybe. It's a bluff catcher with some redraw, or villain will call with like the 3x of hearts, ace 3 of hearts, etc. Hands we're doing really well against. And we also deny equity with this hand because the pair of 7s is somewhat vulnerable to the folding range, i.e., I don't know, jack 9 or whatever, that has to fold to an overbet on turn here. That's double gutter, but certainly a single gutter would definitely have to fold here like Queen 9, and that's kind of live against us, right? So that's what's going on with those hybrid hands. They're a little bit weird. When you get down to the fourth pair, you can see here that there's going to be, we don't really have a lot of the 3x actually, but Queen 3 of hearts is actually a pure bet. So just looking for those combo draw hybrid type hands can be important in a spot like this, and those are 7x, 3x with the flush draw in this particular sim. Okay, now for my main takeaways. This is something I definitely recommend that you do. Before we wrap up the video, I want to show you what they would be for me. You can tell me if you agree in the comments and they're the same for you, or whether there's something different. Now, when I play the spot in game prior to this study session that we've just done here together, I think I would miss this thing about ace queen ace jack. I would get this backwards. I would bet ace jack and check ace queen, because I would reason that this has more showdown value to this, but you can see that this is wrong. And the reason it's wrong is that villain will call ace jack to the turn here, but with a 3-bet ace queen preflop, and therefore we're value betting, hybridy, betting more successfully with ace queen here than with ace jack. Really, really cool spot. Really fun thing to take into account. The next thing I would take away from this is that I'm not aggressive enough with wheel ace and a6. I do bet this sometimes, especially with the heart, but I kind of forget. And you can also bet here with the ace of diamonds when you're unblocking the backdoors from the flop, like the spades and clubs, as we can see here. And I would forget the diamond pattern here a little bit. I wouldn't notice what suit the ace was if it wasn't a heart, which is something I can work on. Another thing I can work on is just remembering that like the 7x of hearts has mixed bag reasons for betting, right? Like the Queen 7 of hearts, it's like a hybrid hand. Same for like the Queen 3 of hearts and stuff like that. And I guess the final thing that I would try to get into my head here is that certain hands have to be given up on wet return textures. So I might misremember this in game, and I might look down at something like Jack 4 of diamonds, and I might bet that hand because I'm like, well, do you know what? This is a great word for my range, and I can bluff really aggressively. And that is true, but just on the wet return cards is a bit more of a minimum standard actually going on here. Okay, so these are the main takeaways here. I think I'm doing an okay job of this node in summary, but not a perfect job. Oh, one final thing might be that I might not pure bet with like King Jack. I might think that's optional now or something. I might not realize it's like so high equity that it has to play bet here on the turn. So yeah, I think that's the final thing I would add. Okay, that's what I'm doing. That's the protocol. In summary, we are laying out a bunch of spots in a PowerPoint. We are describing what our toolkit is going to be against the reg, like what's our game plan going to be by default. We are linking GTO Wizard Sims to turn cards and studying them. You can even link them to flops as well and start studying those. And eventually we can flesh this out and have river spots involved and things like that too. I hope this has been useful for you guys. This is how I'm going to be studying, or one of the ways I'm going to be studying in 2025. If you like this kind of content, I can do more guides like this for different spots. Let me know in the comments what types of spot you want me to cover. And final reminder, it is 25% off for the rest of this month at Carrot Corner on all of our courses. Don't miss our January sale. If you go on the website right now, you'll see our beautiful snow falling, our designer belt there. Go and have a look at the snow. Enjoy it while it lasts. It's going to be spring soon, and you're going to be pining for things like January sales You're sitting there in April being like, I've got to work on my poker game, but there aren't any sales. Oh wait, there might be an Easter sale then. But anyway, hope you guys have enjoyed, and I'll see you soon for more content. More study streams coming as well with me and Sam. Pay attention to those. And yeah, let me know what you think. Say hello. Smash the like button. Get out of here. Bye bye.